1 year had passed since Jiho had pulled Nari from the darkness of the mine. Today, she stood in the Galactic Council chamber, preparing to tell her story to representatives from across the galaxy. The chamber was massive and intimidating. Rows of seats rose up in circles, each filled with delegates from different species. Some looked interested. Some looked bored. Some looked annoyed that they had to be there. Nari's hands were shaking. Dayun squeezed her shoulder from the seat behind her. "You can do this. Just speak from your heart." The council chairman called for order. The room quieted. All eyes turned to Nari. She stood and walked to the center platform. The lights were bright. Her voice felt small in the huge space, but she had promised to speak for those who couldn't. So she would. "My name is Nari," she began. Her voice was quiet but clear. "I am from Valar. When I was 14 years old, the Draxan Empire attacked my planet. They killed my family. They took me and hundreds of others as slaves." She paused, gathering strength. "I spent 8 years in their uranium mines. I watched people die every day from exhaustion, from radiation, from punishment. I watched children become broken shells of themselves. I watched hope die. Some of the delegates were paying attention now. Others still looked unmoved." Nari pulled back her sleeve, showing the scars on her arms. "These are from handling raw uranium." She touched her neck where the collar had been. "This is where they controlled me with electric shocks." She gestured to her whole body. "Every part of me carries the marks of what they did. But I'm not here to ask for your pity," she said, her voice growing stronger. "I'm here to demand justice, not just for me, for the thousands of beings still suffering in Draxan facilities, for those who died before anyone could save them." She pulled out a list from her pocket. "These are names. People I knew in the mines. Seo Jin, who collapsed and was beaten. Young Ho, who died of radiation sickness. Eri, who gave up hope and stopped eating. Bora, who tried to escape and was executed as an example." Her voice broke slightly, but she continued. "There are 347 names on this list. People I personally knew who died in just one facility. How many thousands more have died in facilities across the Empire?" The chamber was completely silent now. "Some of you profit from this system," Nari said, looking directly at certain delegates. "Some of you turn a blind eye because it's convenient. Some of you tell yourselves it's not your problem. But every day you do nothing, more people die. More children lose their families. More hope disappears from the universe." The Draxan ambassador stood abruptly. "This is an emotional display, not evidence. One individual's story doesn't represent the complexity of labor systems across the galaxy." Before Nari could respond, Jiho stood from the witness section. The chairman recognized him. Jiho walked to stand beside Nari. His presence was solid and reassuring. "You call this an emotional display," Jiho said calmly. "I call it humanity. The ability to feel pain, to recognize suffering, to care about others. That's not weakness. That's what separates civilization from barbarism." He turned to address the full council. Humanity measures civilization not by technology or military might, but by how a society treats its most vulnerable members. By that measure, the Draxan Empire and everyone who enables it has failed. "We have documented evidence from 23 facilities," Jiho continued. "Medical records, testimonies from hundreds of survivors, financial records showing the profit from slave labor. This isn't one person's story. This is systematic exploitation on a massive scale." The Draxan ambassador tried to interrupt, but the chairman silenced him. "The question before this council is simple," Jiho said. "Will you stand for justice or will you stand for profit? Will you protect the vulnerable or will you protect the powerful? The choice you make today will define this council's legacy for generations." He looked around the chamber. "History will remember what you do here. Make sure it's something worth remembering." The vote that followed was close, but it passed. The Galactic Council agreed to impose sanctions on the Draxan Empire and investigate all known slave operations. It wasn't everything Nari had hoped for, but it was a start. As they left the chamber, Nari felt exhausted but also lighter. She had spoken. She had been heard. She had made a difference. That evening, back at Station Sanctuary, Kyungmi found Nari with urgent news. "We've located some survivors from Valar. One of them might be someone you know." Nari's heart leaped. "Who, a woman named Misun? She was in a different facility. We're bringing her here, Misun, her childhood friend, her neighbor. The girl who used to climb trees with her in the glowing forests." Nari had assumed she was dead. When Misun arrived 2 days later, they stood facing each other in the arrival bay. Both had changed so much. Both carried the same scars, the same haunted look in their eyes. Then Misun whispered Nari's name, and they fell into each other's arms, crying. They cried for what they had lost. They cried for what they had survived. They cried for the miracle of finding each other again. Over the next weeks, they shared their stories. The different facilities, the different horrors, the different ways they had survived, but also the same determination to live, the same refusal to let the Draxons destroy them completely. One evening, as they walked through the station's garden, Misun asked the question, "What happens now? Where do we go from here?" Nari looked around the garden. She saw the starbloom flowers from Valar, now growing strong and healthy. She saw other rescued beings walking peacefully. She saw Dawn helping a new arrival. She saw Haywan teaching someone self-defense. She saw Jiho tending to plants. Patient and kind as always. "Now we help others find their way home," Nari said. 3 months later, Station Sanctuary held a celebration for the 200th person successfully rehabilitated and rehomed. The garden level was decorated with lights and flowers from 100 different worlds. Nari had been asked to give a speech. She stood before the crowd of survivors, volunteers, and friends. Bomi, the young girl from the rescue mission, stood beside her. Misun was in the front row. Jiho and his team were there too. "I came here a year ago broken and ready to die," Nari began. "I had lost everything. My home, my family, my hope. I didn't believe I deserved to live, and I certainly didn't believe life could ever be good again." She looked at Jiho. "Then I met humans, these impossibly stubborn, compassionate beings who refused to let me give up. They taught me something I had forgotten. They taught me that healing is possible, that hope is real, that kindness still exists in this universe." Her voice grew stronger. "They gave me something I thought I had lost forever. Not just freedom, hope, real hope. The kind that grows and spreads and refuses to die." She gestured around the garden. "This place exists because humans believe every life matters. Every person deserves dignity. Every being has value. That's not normal in this galaxy. That's special. That's what makes them different." Nari pulled out a small pouch from her pocket. "I have seeds here from Valar. Starbloom flowers. I'm going to plant them today in this garden. Not as a memorial to what was lost, but as a symbol of new growth, of second chances, of hope that refuses to die." She knelt down and began to dig. Jiho knelt beside her. Then Daun, then Haywan, then Bomi, then Misun, then dozens of others all planting seeds together. As Nari placed the tiny seed in the soil and covered it gently, she thought about her journey. From the darkness of the mind to this moment, surrounded by people who cared, people who had become her family. She looked at Jiho, who was carefully planting his own seed. He glanced up and smiled at her. That smile that had first shown her that kindness still existed. "Thank you," she said softly. "For everything. For saving me. For teaching me to save myself." Jiho shook his head. "You saved yourself, Nari. We just held out a hand in the darkness. You were the one brave enough to take it." They stood together, looking at the newly planted seeds. Tiny and vulnerable now, but with the potential to grow into something beautiful. Just like hope, Nari thought. Just like healing. Just like her, she had been shattered. She had been broken into pieces so small she thought they could never be put back together. But here she was, not the same as before, changed, scarred, but whole in a new way. Stronger for having been broken and choosing to heal. Her past had shaped her. The pain had changed her. But it didn't define her anymore. She was not what had been done to her. She was what she chose to become. A survivor. A healer. A voice for the voiceless. A planter of seeds that would grow into hope for others. As the celebration continued around her, Nari stood in the garden surrounded by her family of choice. The stars visible through the viewport above shone bright and clear. She thought of all the beings still suffering in darkness. She thought of the work still to be done, the battle still to be fought, the hope still to be spread. It would be hard. There would be setbacks. There would be pain and loss and days when it felt impossible. But she wasn't alone. She had found something in this cold universe that she thought didn't exist anymore. She had found humanity, not the species, but the quality. Compassion, kindness, the stubborn refusal to accept that suffering is inevitable, and she had found hope. Real, growing, unstoppable hope, like a starbloom seed planted in good soil, ready to bloom into something beautiful. 6 months after her rescue, Nari stood in the briefing room listening to Jiho explain the next mission. Her heart was racing, but not from fear, from determination. "We've received intelligence about another Draxon mining facility," Jiho was saying. "The mission is to gather evidence for the Galactic Council, document the conditions, record testimonies. We're not there to fight, just to witness and report." Nari took a deep breath. "I want to come with you." The room went quiet. Jiho looked at her with concern. "Nari, I don't think that's a good idea. Going back to a place like that could trigger your trauma. It's too soon." "No," Nari said firmly. "It's not too soon. I need to do this." "Why?" Jiho asked gently. Nari met his eyes. "Because you saved my body, but I need to save my soul. I need to help others the way you helped me. I need to prove to myself that I'm more than what they made me." Jiho studied her face for a long moment. Then he sighed. "If you come, you train first. Properly, and if at any point it becomes too much, you tell me immediately. Deal?" "Deal," Nari said. The next 3 weeks were intense. Heywan, the pilot with the sharp tongue and sharper mind, took charge of Nari's training. Again, Heywan barked as Nari tried to pin her for the 20th time. Nari was exhausted and bruised, but she got up. She had spent 8 years being pushed around. Now she was learning to push back. This time, when she went for the pin, she remembered everything Heywan had taught her. Use your opponent's weight against them. Don't fight strength with strength. Be smart, not just strong. She twisted at the last second and used Heywan's momentum to flip her. For the first time, Nari successfully pinned her trainer. Heywan grinned up at her from the mat. "There we go. You're not prey anymore, Nari, you're a hunter." Those words hit Nari harder than any punch. She wasn't prey. For 8 years, that's all she had been. Something to be used and discarded. But not anymore. She also trained with Kyung-mi, the communications officer, learning how to operate ship systems and use different technologies. Kyung-mi was patient and encouraging, celebrating every small victory. Finally, the day of the mission arrived. The team gathered in the hangar bay. Jiho, Dayun, Haiwan, Kyung-mi, and now Nari. They looked professional in their gear, but Nari could see the kindness in their eyes. These weren't just her teammates. They were her family. "Remember," Jiho said as they boarded the small transport ship, "we stay together. We watch each other's backs. And we come home safe, all of us." The journey to the mining facility took 3 days. Nari spent most of it studying the layout, memorizing escape routes, preparing herself mentally. The night before they arrived, she couldn't sleep. Dalwin found her in the ship's small galley drinking tea. "Nervous?" Dayun asked, sitting down across from her. "Terrified," Nari admitted. "But I need to do this." Dayun reached across the table and took her hand. "You've already been so brave. You don't have anything to prove. I'm not doing this to prove anything to anyone else," Nari said. "I'm doing it for me. I need to know that I can face this, that I'm stronger than my fear." Dayun smiled. "Then we'll be right there with you." The infiltration went smoothly at first. They used false credentials to enter the facility as inspectors. The Draxon guards were suspicious but followed protocol. Walking through the corridors, Nari felt the memories pressing in. The smell, the sounds, the atmosphere of fear and despair. But she kept breathing, kept moving forward. Her knowledge of mining operations proved valuable. She pointed out things the others would have missed. Hidden cameras, guard rotation patterns, the way slaves moved to avoid certain areas. When they reached the slave quarters, Nari had to stop and steady herself. Jiho was beside her immediately. "We can wait outside if you need to." "No," Nari said. "I need to go in." The room was exactly like the one she had lived in. Rows of metal bunks, thin blankets, the smell of unwashed bodies and fear. Dozens of slaves stared at them with hollow eyes. Nari saw herself in every face. The despair, the hopelessness, the quiet acceptance of suffering. Then she saw the girl. She was young, maybe 13, with skin that had once been bright but was now dull with exhaustion and malnutrition. She sat alone in the corner, holding herself like she was trying to disappear. Nari saw her 14-year-old self in that girl, the same fear, the same broken spirit. the same desperate need for someone to care. Without thinking, Nari walked over and knelt down slowly. The girl flinched, expecting violence. "It's okay," Nari said softly in Galactic Standard. "I'm not going to hurt you." The girl looked up at her with eyes that held no hope. Nari understood that look. She had worn it herself for years, so she said the words that she wished someone had said to her. "My name is Nari. I was a slave like you, but I'm not anymore, and soon you won't be either. We're going to get you out of here. I promise." The girl's eyes widened slightly. A tiny spark of something appeared. Not quite hope, not yet, but possibility. That's when the alarm started. Their cover was blown. Draxon guards poured into the room. Jiho's team moved to defensive positions. But they were outnumbered. "Get behind me," Nari told the girl, positioning herself between the child and the guards. Jiho was trying to negotiate, but the guards weren't listening. One of them raised his weapon toward the slaves. In that moment, Nari made a choice. She had spent 8 years being afraid, 8 years letting fear control her. But today she was done being afraid. She stepped forward. "No." The guard turned his weapon toward her. Haywan moved fast, disarming him with a precise strike. The situation exploded into chaos. In the fight that followed, Nari used everything she had learned. She protected the younger slaves. She helped Jiho's team. She was not a victim anymore. She was a protector. When reinforcements from the Terran ship arrived, they found Jiho's team surrounded but unbroken, standing together, protecting the slaves behind them. Haywan stood at the front, fierce and unyielding. She looked at the Draxon guards and said something that would become legendary among the team. "You want them? Come through us first." The guards hesitated. They had expected hired workers who would run at the first sign of trouble. Instead, they faced people who were willing to die protecting others. The standoff ended when Terran security forces stormed the facility. Every slave was evacuated. Every piece of evidence was secured. As they boarded the rescue ship, the young girl Nari had protected stayed close to her. "What's your name?" Nari asked gently. "Bomi," the girl whispered. "Well, Bomi," Nari said, kneeling down to her level. "You're safe now, and I'm going to make sure you stay safe. I promise." Bomi looked at her with those same empty eyes Nari remembered having. But there was something else there now. A tiny seed of hope. Jiho put his hand on Nari's shoulder. "You did good today. Really good." Nari looked around at her team, at the freed slaves, at Bomi holding her hand. For the first time since her rescue, Nari felt like she had found her purpose. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was living, and she was helping others live too. 3 months had passed since Nari arrived at Station Sanctuary. 3 months of learning to live again. The station was a massive structure floating in neutral space. It was run by humans and served as a place where rescued slaves could recover and decide their futures. There were gardens inside with real plants, cafeterias where people could choose what to eat, medical facilities that actually healed instead of just keeping bodies functional enough to work. But recovery wasn't as simple as Nari had hoped. The nightmares came almost every night. She would wake up screaming, back in the mines, feeling the shock collar activate. The smell of burning uranium would fill her nose even though it wasn't real. Her hands would shake for hours afterward. Tonight was one of those nights. Nari jerked awake at 2 a.m, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might break through her chest. The room was dark, too dark. She couldn't breathe. She stumbled out of bed and pressed the emergency button Daun had showed her. Then she collapsed against the wall, trying to remember how to breathe. Minutes later, there was a soft knock at her door. "Nari?" It was Jiho's voice, calm, steady. "Are you okay? I'm outside if you need to talk." Nari pressed her forehead against the door. She wanted to say yes, she was fine, that he could go back to sleep. But the words wouldn't come. "I'm going to sit here for a bit," Jiho said. "You don't have to open the door or say anything." "I'll just be here." She heard him settle on the floor outside. For a while there was just silence, then Jiho started talking. His voice was quiet, almost like he was talking to himself. "I lost my family 7 years ago," he said. "Raiders attacked our colony, my wife Sua and my daughter Yuri. They were home when it happened. I was at work, installing new water systems on the other side of the settlement." Nari listened, her breathing slowly getting easier. "By the time I got there, it was over," Jiho continued. "I spent months asking myself why I survived when they didn't. why I wasn't there, why I couldn't save them. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "The nightmares were the worst part. Every night I would relive it. Imagine all the ways I could have prevented it, all the ways I failed. How did you stop them?" Nari found herself asking through the door. "I didn't," Jiho said honestly. "They got better over time, but they never completely stopped. What changed was how I dealt with them. I stopped fighting the memories and started accepting them. I stopped seeing myself as broken and started seeing myself as healing. There's a difference. What difference? Broken means you're done, finished beyond repair. Healing means you're in process. It means you're not at the end yet. It means there's hope." Nari absorbed those words. Then slowly she reached for the door control. The door slid open. Jiho was sitting on the floor outside, his back against the wall. He looked up at her and smiled gently. "Hey." "Hey," Nari whispered back. "Want to take a walk?" Jiho asked. "The garden level should be quiet this time of night." Nari nodded. They walked through the quiet corridors of the station. Most people were asleep. Their footsteps echoed softly on the metal floors. The garden level was beautiful. Plants from dozens of different worlds grew together in harmony. Soft lights mimicked moonlight. There was even a small stream running through artificial rocks. Jiho led her to a bench overlooking a bed of flowers. They sat down together. "Do you know what these are?" Jiho asked, pointing to some blue flowers with silver edges. Nari leaned closer. Her breath caught. "Starbloom. They're from Valar. From my home. We have seeds from hundreds of worlds here," Jiho said. "Dayan thought having something from home might help you. She planted these last month." Nari reached out with trembling fingers to touch one of the petals. It was soft and cool, just like she remembered. Tears started flowing down her face. "I thought I would never see these again," she whispered. "I thought everything from home was gone." "It's not gone," Jiho said quietly. "And neither are you. You survived, Nari, that matters, but I don't know who I am anymore." Nari said, the words tumbling out. "I was a child when they took me. I never got to be anything else. I never got to decide who I wanted to be. All I know is how to survive, how to keep my head down, how to take pain without breaking completely. That's all I am." Jiho turned to face her. "That's not all you are. You're someone who stepped in front of a guard to protect a stranger. You're someone who survived 8 years of hell and came out the other side. You're someone who's learning to live again, even though it's scary. That's not nothing, Nari, that's incredible. How do I figure out who I'm supposed to be now?" "One choice at a time," Jiho said. "Small ones at first. What do you want to eat today? What color do you want to wear? What do you want to learn about?" Each choice is you deciding who you are. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, surrounded by flowers from 100 different worlds. "Can I ask you something?" Nari said eventually. "Of course, why do humans do this? Help people like me? Most species in the galaxy don't care about slaves. Some even profit from it. But you risk your lives. You spend your resources. Why?" Jiho thought about it for a moment. "Because we remember," he said finally. "Humans have done terrible things to each other throughout our history. We've had slavery. We've had wars. We've hurt and been hurt. We know what suffering looks like. And we decided that we never want to forget that pain, because if we forget, we might let it happen again. So you help because you were hurt? We help because we know how it feels to hurt, and we know how much it means when someone reaches out a hand in the darkness. We can't fix everything. We can't save everyone, but we can try, and trying matters." Nari looked at the starbloom flowers again. Then she looked at Jiho. In his eyes, she saw genuine kindness. Genuine care, not because he wanted something from her, just because he believed she mattered. "Thank you," she said softly. "For everything. For saving me. For being patient with me. For not giving up on me," Jiho smiled. "You're worth not giving up on, Nari. I hope someday you'll see that too." They stayed in the garden until dawn started to brighten the artificial sky above them. And when they left, Nari felt lighter than she had in months. She still had nightmares. She still struggled with basic choices. She still had days where getting out of bed felt impossible. But she also had something new. She had people who cared. She had a safe place. She had flowers from home, and she had hope. Small and fragile like a starbloom seed, but growing. The woman with the medical bag moved through the room like water flowing around stones. She was checking each slave, her movements gentle and deliberate. When she reached Nari, she smiled softly. I'm Da-un, she said. I'm going to remove your collar now. It might feel strange, but it won't hurt. I promise. Nari's hand flew to her neck instinctively. The collar. She had worn it for so long that she barely felt it anymore. It was part of her, a constant reminder of what she was, property, slave, nothing. Da-un held up a small tool. May I? Nari didn't know how to respond. No one had asked her permission for anything in 8 years. She managed a small nod. The tool made a soft clicking sound. There was a moment of pressure, then a release. The collar fell away, Nari gasped. Her hand went to her bare neck. The skin there was raw and scarred, but free. Actually free, she started shaking. Not from fear. From something else. Something overwhelming that she couldn't name. Da-un squeezed her shoulder gently. You're doing great. Just breathe. Jiho was talking to the other freed slaves, explaining what was happening. His voice was calm and steady. We're with the Terran Exploration Corps. We've taken control of this facility. You're all free to leave. We'll take you somewhere safe where you can rest and decide what you want to do next. Free. That word again. It sounded like a foreign language. Another human appeared in the doorway. This one was a woman with short hair and a confident stride. She had a gun holstered at her hip, but her hands were relaxed. Everyone able to walk, come with me. We're heading to the ship. Take your time. No one's going to rush you. The slaves began to move, slow and uncertain. Some had to be carried. Others leaned on each other for support. Nari watched them go, but her legs wouldn't work. She couldn't make herself stand, Jiho noticed. He crouched beside her again. Take your time. There's no hurry. Why? The word came out as barely a whisper. It was the first thing Nari had said to him. Why what? Jiho asked gently. Why are you doing this? What do you want from us? Jiho was quiet for a moment. Then he said, we don't want anything from you. We're doing this because it's right. Because everyone deserves to be free. Nari stared at him. That made no sense. Nothing in the galaxy was free. Everything had a price. Everyone wanted something. You don't have to believe me yet, Jiho said, reading her expression. Just come with us. See for yourself. He stood and offered his hand again. This time, after a long moment, Nari took it. His hand was warm and calloused. Strong but gentle. He pulled her to her feet carefully, letting her find her balance. The walk to the ship was like walking through a dream. Or maybe a nightmare. Nari couldn't tell which. They passed through corridors she recognized, but everything looked different now. There were human soldiers everywhere, but they weren't attacking the slaves. They were protecting them. Escorting them. One soldier even gave his jacket to an elderly alien who was shivering. The ship itself was massive, clean, well lit, so different from the darkness of the mine that Nari had to squint. Da-un guided her to what she called a medical bay. The room was white and sterile, but somehow not cold. There were beds with actual mattresses. Equipment that hummed softly. The smell was clean, antiseptic. Nothing like the toxic dust of the mines. Sit here, Da-un said, patting a bed. I need to check you over. Make sure you're okay. The examination was thorough but gentle. Da-un explained everything she was doing before she did it. Checking for radiation exposure, treating the burns and scars, assessing malnutrition. You've been through a lot, Da-un said quietly, but you're strong. Your body has been fighting hard to keep you alive. Nari didn't feel strong. She felt broken, used up, empty. Da-un seemed to sense her thoughts. Strong doesn't mean undamaged. It means you survived. That takes incredible strength. After the examination, Da-un led Nari to what she called quarters. A small room with a real bed, soft blankets, and a door that locked from the inside. This is yours, Da-un explained. No one will come in unless you ask them to. You can rest. There's food in the small box by the bed. If you need anything, just press this button and someone will come help you. Nari stood in the doorway, unable to process what she was seeing. A room, her own room, with a door she could lock. It seemed impossible. Da-un squeezed her hand. You're safe here, Nari. I know that's hard to believe right now, but you are. After Da-un left, Nari stood in the center of the small room for a long time. She was afraid to move, afraid to touch anything. This had to be temporary. This had to be some kind of trick. Eventually, exhaustion won. She sat on the edge of the bed. The mattress was soft. Softer than anything she had felt in 8 years. She lay back slowly. The blanket was warm, clean. It smelled like nothing, which was better than the toxic smell she had lived with for so long. Nari stared at the ceiling. The lights were dim but not dark. Comfortable. The hum of the ship's engines was steady and almost soothing compared to the grinding machinery of the mine. She waited for the other shoe to drop. For someone to burst in and drag her back. For this to reveal itself as the elaborate torture it must be. But nothing happened. Hours passed. Nari didn't sleep. She couldn't. Sleep meant vulnerability. Sleep meant not being ready for whatever came next. But as the hours stretched on and nothing bad happened, something strange began to occur. She started to cry. Not sad tears. Not exactly. These were different. Years of held-back emotion pouring out all at once. Fear and relief and confusion and something that might have been the beginning of hope. She cried until she had nothing left. Until her body was exhausted from the release. And then, for the first time in 8 years, Nari fell into a sleep that wasn't haunted by the sound of machinery and the crack of shock rods. She dreamed of purple skies and glowing forests. She dreamed of her mother's voice singing. She dreamed of home. When she woke, it was to soft morning light filtering through a viewport she hadn't noticed before. Through it, she could see stars, real stars, not the artificial lights of the mine, not the red glow of emergency systems, just stars scattered across the darkness of space like diamonds. Nari walked to the viewport on shaking legs. She pressed her hand against the transparent material. It was cool under her palm. She stood there for a long time, watching the stars drift by as the ship traveled through space. And for the first time since she was 14 years old, Nari allowed herself to think a dangerous thought. Maybe, just maybe, she could have a future after all. The alarm screamed at exactly 4 in the morning. Nari opened her eyes in the darkness. Her body ached from the previous day's work, but she knew better than to stay in bed. The shock collar around her neck would activate in 30 seconds if she didn't move. She pushed herself up from the hard metal bunk. Around her, hundreds of other slaves were doing the same. Different species, different worlds, but all wearing the same gray uniforms and metal collars, all with the same empty look in their eyes. Nari was 22 years old, though she barely remembered being anything other than a slave. 8 years. 8 long years since the Draxan ships came to her planet. 8 years since she watched her home burn and felt her mother's hands torn from hers. She joined the line of workers shuffling toward the mine entrance. The air was thick with dust that made her lungs burn. Red emergency lights cast everything in a bloody glow. The sound of machinery was constant, a grinding noise that never stopped, not even in her dreams. The overseer, a massive Draxan with scales like black armor, watched them pass. His eyes were cold and calculated. He held a shock rod in one hand, and Nari knew from experience how much pain that rod could deliver. Nari kept her head down as she walked past him. 8 years had taught her the rules. Don't make eye contact. Don't speak unless spoken to. Don't stop working. Don't think about freedom. She reached her station deep in the mine. The uranium deposits glowed faintly in the darkness, radioactive, deadly. But the Draxans didn't care about that. Slaves were cheap, easier to replace than to protect. Nari's hands were scarred from years of handling the raw ore. Her blue skin, once bright and luminescent like all Velari, was now dull and marked with burns. She picked up her tools and began to work. Sometimes while she worked, her mind would drift back to before. She would remember purple skies and forests that glowed at night. She would remember her mother's voice singing old songs, her father's strong arms lifting her up, her little brother's laugh. But those memories hurt more than the work, so she tried to keep them locked away. It was easier to feel nothing, safer to be numb. Hours passed. The work was brutal and monotonous. Lift, carry, load, repeat. Her muscles screamed. Her back bent under the weight. But she didn't stop. Stopping meant punishment. Near midday, something happened that broke the routine. A young slave, a Korvathi barely old enough to work, collapsed next to Nari. He fell hard, his container of ore spilling across the ground. He was shaking, his skin showing signs of radiation sickness. The overseer was there in seconds. His heavy boots thudded on the stone floor. He looked down at the collapsed boy with disgust. The boy tried to stand but couldn't. His legs wouldn't hold him. The overseer raised his shock rod. Nari knew what came next. She had seen it before. Slaves who couldn't work were eliminated. It was efficient. It was the Draxan way. For 8 years, Nari had kept her head down. For 8 years she had survived by being invisible, but something in her chest twisted as she watched the rod begin its descent toward the boy's head. She moved before she could think, before fear could stop her. She stepped between the overseer and the boy. The shock rod hit her instead. Pain exploded through her body like lightning. Every nerve burned. She fell to her knees, gasping. The overseer stared down at her. For a moment there was something like surprise in his eyes. Slaves didn't interfere. Slaves didn't protect each other. That instinct had been beaten out of them long ago. Nari looked up at him. Her voice came out as barely a whisper, but it was the first word she had spoken in months. In her own language, she said something simple. No. The overseer laughed. It was a cold, cruel sound. He raised the rod again, this time to finish what he started. But then the alarm started screaming. Red lights flashed to white, then back to red. A mechanical voice echoed through the mine in Galactic Standard. Hull breach. Section 7. All personnel report to stations. The overseer's head snapped toward the sound. He barked orders at other guards, then pointed at Nari and the sick boy. Lock them in the holding area. Deal with them later. Rough hands grabbed Nari and dragged her away. She didn't resist. Her body was still shaking from the shock rod. The boy was dragged alongside her. They were thrown into a small room with dozens of other slaves. The door slammed shut. Nari could hear shouting outside. Running footsteps. The sound of weapons firing. The slaves huddled together in fear. Some were crying. Others stared at nothing, their minds already broken beyond repair. Nari sat with her back against the wall. She expected to die here. The Draxons would probably blow the section to stop whatever was attacking. She had accepted death long ago. At least it would be an end to the pain. She closed her eyes and thought of home one last time. Purple skies, glowing trees. Her mother's song. Then the door exploded. Metal shrieked and tore. Smoke filled the room. Nari threw her arms up to protect her face. Through the smoke, a figure appeared. Not a Draxon guard. Someone different. He was tall but not massive like the Draxons. He wore a simple gray jumpsuit with patches and symbols she didn't recognize. A breathing mask covered the lower half of his face, but his eyes were visible. Brown eyes, warm, kind, concerned. He held up both hands, showing they were empty. No weapons, no shock rod, just open palms. He spoke in Galactic Standard, but his accent was strange. Soft. We're here to help you. You're safe now. Nari didn't move. Safe? The word didn't make sense. There was no such thing as safe. This had to be a trick. Another form of torture. More figures appeared behind the first man, all dressed the same. All moving carefully, slowly, like they were approaching frightened animals. One of them, a woman with kind eyes, knelt beside the sick boy. She was talking to him quietly while pulling medical tools from a bag, actually helping him. The first man moved closer to Nari. He knelt down slowly so he was at her level, not towering over her. His eyes met hers. My name is Jiho, he said. I know you don't have any reason to trust me, but I promise you we're going to get you out of here. Nari stared at him, at those impossible gentle eyes, at the hand he was extending toward her. Not demanding, just offering. For the first time in 8 years, something stirred in her chest. Not hope, not yet. She had forgotten what hope felt like. But maybe, just maybe, it was the smallest possibility that things could be different. She didn't take his hand. Not yet. But she didn't look away either, and in that moment, in a dark room filled with smoke and fear, something began to change.